This is what made me think about this animal with amazement, so that I have not forgotten it to this day. From that time on, wherever I went wandering and wherever I stayed, I was not afraid, because my heart had full faith in Dhamma from then on. For as it says in the Paṭipadā, Dhamma guards those who practice the way, and it certainly does not discard them, letting them die buried in mud or water like an old log of wood. Fighting the Kilesas. Knowledge of the Chitta and of Dhamma which reaches the heart is most likely to be found at those times when one is in a critical situation. If the situation is not really critical, the Chitta tends to play act as if it is so, causing one to become excited and agitated by endless kinds of kilesas which one could hardly keep up with and cure. In fact, one is likely to let them inundate oneself while seeing them in full view right there, as if one was quite unable to restrain them or to follow and cure them so that they may fall away and disappear. But when the situation is truly critical, and one is genuinely driven into a corner, the Chitta and Dhamma become strong, though where the strength comes from is hard to say. The heart then bows down and submits, accepting oneself and Dhamma with faith and without any resistance. Then if one decides to make it act in any way, or to take hold of any aspect of Dhamma, it accepts and does just that without any opposition. This is probably due to the fear of death, which could in fact take place if it was uncooperative. So the Chitta becomes compliant and easy to teach, without being stubborn at such a time. This is probably the reason why Thudanga Kammarthana bhikkhus like going into the forests and hills, even though they are afraid of death, and one part of the heart does not want to go in such places. My Chitta was like this, but how it is with other people's Chittas I cannot say. Although if they are determined and fully committed to training themselves so as to get to the causes and reach the results of this way in truth, it should be much the same for them as well, because the Chitta is the dwelling place of both Dhamma and the Kilesas, which make all people feel full of courage or fear, and good or evil respectively, in the same way. Training in accordance with causes, the results of which are the purpose and aim of Dhamma, is therefore able to make all the various kinds of kilesas surrender and vanish, until they have all gone without leaving any trace or seed that could grow again. For myself, I have rather coarse and rough characteristics, so I tend to have confidence in strict discipline and rough methods to enable me to counteract the kilesas, which are those gross forms of nature which I have within me. Like that time when the large elephant came walking up to me while I was walking Chankama. That was a time when I clearly saw the kilesas as well as the Dhamma of the Lord Buddha within my heart. Normally the Chitta which has kilesas that dominate and are in charge of the heart is very difficult to discipline and train. Sometimes those who set out to kill and destroy them end up dying before they succeed in doing so, because of the mean tenacity at the core of the asavas, which have been squatting there within us and feeding on us for long ages. But as soon as I got to the point where there was no escape when the great elephant came to help me, the most stubborn kilesas which had been so clever in resisting my efforts all went into hiding, though where they went I don't know. Then it became easy to instruct the heart so that when I ordered it to be like this or that, and when I wanted it to remain fixed to an aspect of Dhamma, it immediately agreed and did so. It was as if oil had been put in the machinery so that there was virtually no friction as there had been before. As soon as the kilesas went away from the heart, the Dhamma which had already been developed and was just waiting there arose at the same moment and shone forth brightly. And also courage and fearlessness towards everything immediately arose within the heart. All this that I had longed for so long was there for me to see and admire to my heart's content. Meanwhile the fear of death had gone. Where to I don't know, but it enabled me to see quite clearly that fear is a type of kilesa which has always appeared quite openly. As soon as the fear which had been oppressing and deceiving my heart disappeared, or even though it may not have entirely disappeared, it made me see quite clearly at that moment how baneful a thing it is. After this, Whenever fear should arise, as it may at times, I knew that what I had experienced and seen was enough to act as a reminder for me to know that this fear is not my friend and benefactor, but an enemy who has come in the guise of a friend. So it could no longer make my heart have confidence in it as it used to, and I should endeavor to drive it out every time it arises throughout my life of striving for Dhamma, until the essential nature of this enemy, which comes as though it were a friend, is at an end and has entirely disappeared from my heart. Only then can I relax and be happy and free from all kinds of concerns and anxieties. It seems to me that if only we can be anxious to take refuge in Dhamma, to have interest in Dhamma, to love and attend closely to Dhamma, and practice Dhamma truly in the way that the Lord showed us with complete certainty and true metta, the knowing and seeing of Dhamma at its various levels, which the immediate followers of the Lord Buddha during his lifetime knew and saw, will not be a puzzle that is beyond our capability, which so many suppose it to be. We will then certainly be able to experience Dhamma as a matter of course, in the same way as they knew and saw it at the time of the Lord Buddha. The reason why the time, place, and people in this present age are so contrary to those at the time of the Lord Buddha, insofar as the ways of the path and fruition are concerned, is because we ourselves act in ways that oppose our own development by wanting results without being interested in causes. These causes are the ways in which we usually behave and practice that may be right or wrong in various aspects, whereas what we ought to do is to adjust and alter our actions of body, speech, and mind as necessary, to make them conform to Dhamma, which is the way of action leading to the path, fruition, and nibbana. If we constantly examine and test ourselves against the standard of Dhamma for the purpose of attaining whatever we have set our hearts on, we will at least succeed in attaining that purpose to our satisfaction at whatever level it may be, depending on the strength of each one's mindfulness and wisdom. Because the age when the Lord Buddha taught and this present age are both ages in which the kilesas should be corrected and cured by means of Dhamma, and also dispersed and got rid of by Dhamma. This is like various kinds of disease that have always been prevalent in all ages, and which have always been curable by using the right remedy. I have had faith in this for a long time, and the longer I go on practicing, the stronger does it become buried in my heart, where nothing can remove it, and the more do I hear the words which Venerable Ajaan used to teach me, which went deep into my heart at the time when I stayed with him. This firm faith went deeper and deeper into my heart, until it became one with my heart. Like he used to teach us, in watching the kilesas and searching for Dhamma, none of you should overlook the heart, which is the place where the kilesas and all Dhamma dwells. Both the kilesas and Dhamma are to be found only in the heart, and not elsewhere in any time or place whatsoever, for they arise in the heart, develop in the heart, and die away in the heart, the only one that knows this. Trying to cure the kilesas elsewhere and searching for Dhamma in other places is useless, and even if you were to spend the rest of your lives doing so, you would never come across them as they truly are. Even after dying and being reborn many times, you would only come across kilesas that have arisen from the heart, which means that you would experience the discontent and suffering that comes from them. But if you search for Dhamma in the heart, the day will come when you start to find it, and this will then increase steadily, depending on the intensity with which you strive for it. But both place and time are also conditions which can promote or suppress the kilesas and Dhamma, respectively causing them to develop or deteriorate. Thus, for instance, forms and sounds are conditions which promote the kilesas which are already in the heart, causing them to develop and increase. On the other hand, going to practice the way in the hills and forests is for the purpose of promoting the Dhamma which dwells in the heart, causing it to increase greatly. The real kilesas and Dhamma are within the heart, whereas the conditions which increase or suppress them are to be found everywhere, both internally and externally. This is why the acharyas teach their followers to avoid and to get away from things which are enticing and disturbing to the heart, things that tend to make those kilesas which are already within them become demanding and audacious, such as many things which are experienced through the senses. In addition, They also teach their followers to go wandering and staying in peaceful places where there is solitude, so that they can much more easily disperse their various kilesas by means of their efforts to practice the way, thus diminishing the round of birth and death, the vatta, within their hearts by using these methods. For this reason, to search for a suitable place for the purpose of striving to practice the way is the most appropriate and right way for one who is ordained and hopes to attain freedom from dukkha in his heart. For this is the right way which follows the basic principles of the Dhamma that the Lord Buddha formulated for his followers, after seeing clearly for himself what things were dangers to this purpose. Because staying at times in ordinary places, and at other times in unusual and lonely places, the attitude or feeling about the place which is in one's heart always changes with the place and is quite inconstant. But when one stays long enough in a place, the citta becomes over-familiar with that place. Those who are reflective and watchful of themselves will know immediately once this happens, and will quickly change and move to another place, so as to find the right conditions to prevent themselves relaxing to the point of carelessness. For this would give an opportunity for the kilesas to muster their strength so as to bring about one's ruin without one's being aware of what is happening. But when one corrects the situation right away, without being careless or indifferent to it, the kilesas are not likely to have any chance to build themselves up and gain enough strength to ruin the citta and the Dhamma which is together with them in this one heart, and one is then able to go on without deteriorating. Those who train themselves to see what is dangerous must be able to have mindfulness, sati, continually present to reflect and know, as an adjunct of the heart, without slipping away into forgetful indulgence, and to be able to do this is indeed good. Not slipping away into forgetful indulgence is a barrier against many kinds of kilesas which have not yet arisen, and it gives them no opportunity to arise. As for those that are still there, which have not yet been entirely cured, it prevents them from becoming more arrogant, and it also makes one try to get rid of them with unrelenting mindfulness, wisdom, faith, and effort. Any place where the citta is afraid, and where it has mindfulness to watch and guard oneself well, is a charnel ground for the cremation of all the kilesas by means of the ascetic Dhamma, the tapa Dhamma, the bright fire that burns up the kilesas, which is the making of effort that has mindfulness and wisdom as the means of burning them up to destruction, whether by the jhanas, by samadhi, by panya, wisdom, by vimutti, liberation, by the kilesas losing their power, by the kilesas dying away steadily without having regard to place or time, or by the kilesas dying away entirely and completely from one's heart. It will happen, and it will be absolutely clear to one's heart in that place where one practices in the right way, and where it is well suited to one who strives with zeal in everything in all ways. There is nowhere else where all the kilesas arise and cease, and one must keep it in mind and take it to heart that the place where Dhamma thrives is where the kilesas will deteriorate and die away entirely. What we call that place, those who practice the way should always know, is in the heart alone and nowhere else. Therefore we should struggle to cut the kilesas to pieces and destroy them without fear or favor on the battlefield, which is the heart, while depending on a suitable environment as a supporting condition to enable us to be victorious, to gain salvation, and to reach the highest point of human attainment by the persistence of our own zeal and striving. We must not go astray and be uncertain of the way, thinking that the kilesas and the great mass of our own dukkha are to be found anywhere else but within the sphere of the heart alone. In my own practice from the first beginnings, which were rather haphazard because I had no teacher who was able to teach and train me properly, until I became a teacher myself with my own followers, I have never seen this mass of dukkha anywhere but in the heart, nor have I ever seen any strange and wonderful things surpassing the imagination, the likes of which I had never known or seen before in any place whatsoever, except in the heart alone, which is the abode of all Dhamma and all the kilesas as well. But it is dukkha and its cause, samudaya, in the heart of each one of us that have such power over everything in the three worlds, for they are able to block the way which leads to the path, fruition, and nibbana completely. even when we consider the means or tools for digging out and clearing away dukkha and its cause, so that the path, fruition, and nibbana may be clearly revealed, there is nothing in the three worlds which is able to do this better than nirodha and magga, the path, which are within the same heart. Just this is the whole story. One must not long for other times, places, or people, for this is a hazard and thing which wastes a lot of time and slows one's development without being of any value at all. Thinking like this, rather than thinking about the kilesas and Dhamma which are within one's heart, contradicts the purpose and aim of the great teacher, the Lord Buddha, who bestowed his Dhamma teaching on the world, a teaching which is correct and suitable in all respects at all times. This, in essence, is the teaching which Venerable Ajaan Mun taught in a fully reasoned way while I was living with him in Chiang Mai province. This I can remember quite clearly, for it is buried in my heart, and I have no uncertainty. Nor have I forgotten any of it, right up to the present day. Sometimes Venerable Ajaan Khao had questions which he asked Venerable Ajaan Mun, who answered by admonishing him, saying, "Why do you ask questions like this just as you feel like it, without having first considered the principles of Dhamma to see in what direction the truth should be?" One such question he asked was, at the time of the Lord Buddha, according to his biography and other writings, there were a large number who attained the path, fruition, and nibbana, and quickly as well. There were far more than attain to it nowadays, for few people manage to get there now, and far less than in those days. Also, those who do attain nowadays seem to do so much slower. Venerable Ajaan Mun immediately asked him, "How do you know that there are hardly any who attain the path, fruition, and nibbana nowadays, and that those who do only do so much more slowly, as you say?" Venerable Ajaan Khao replied, "Well, I have never heard of people attaining nibbana like they used to in those days, in accordance with what is written in the old books, when many attained nibbana simultaneously each time the Lord Buddha gave them a talk on Dhamma, and many others did so, going out to practice the way on their own. It also seems that they attained very quickly and easily, and it is a joy to read about the results which they attained. But nowadays people strive until they almost die without seeing the type of results which one feels should come from such effort, which causes those who practice to become discouraged and to become weak in striving." Venerable Ajaan Mun then asked him, "In the old books, does it say whether in those days all those who practiced the way attained quickly and easily, or were there those who practiced the way with difficulty, some gaining understanding slowly and some quickly, as well as those who practiced the way easily, some gaining understanding slowly and some quickly, which would accord with their levels and characteristics, which are very different in different types of people?" Venerable Ajaan Khao answered, saying, "Yes, they did vary quite considerably, and they certainly did not all attain quickly and easily, and there were those who practiced with difficulty, some of whom attained slowly and some quickly. But I still feel that it was very different from the situation nowadays, even though there were various classes of people, as there still are nowadays." Venerable Ajaan Mun then explained, "This difference comes from the leaders and how correctly and precisely they can lead the way, as well as from the power of the virtuous characteristics, vasana, of the Lord Buddha and the Savakas who follow the Buddha, which, when compared with us nowadays, is so different as to be almost beyond comparison. An additional thing is the interest that people have in Dhamma nowadays, which is so different from the time of the Lord Buddha. Even the characteristics of people which are derived from their background in this life are very different nowadays from what they were in those days. So when there are all those differences, that the results should be the same is not really possible. But there is no need for us to talk about other people and ages, which would take a very long time and be tiresome. For in ourselves we display a coarseness which disturbs us all the time, even though we are ordained monks who believe that we have zeal and are striving, sometimes by walking jangama and sometimes by sitting in samadhi bhavana. But these are just the bodily activities, whereas the heart is not striving in any way that corresponds to these activities at all. All it is doing is thinking in ways that accumulate the kilesas and disturb the heart all the time, while we believe that we are striving by means of these activities. When this is the case, the result is bound to disturb and trouble the heart, regardless of when or where we are. Thus we conclude that we have been striving to our utmost, and that we have not gained the results which we should have. But in fact we have been walking Jangama and sitting in Samadhi, and at the same time gathering and accumulating poison, which does nothing but harm to us, without our being in the least aware of it. This is how we do not strive truly and properly as it should be done. Therefore, there is really no comparison between the time of the Lord Buddha, when their striving was genuine, and they were truly concerned to gain freedom from dukkha, as against this present age, where we just play like children with their toys. In fact, the more we try to make comparisons, the more do we show off our kilesas and incompetence. For myself, even though I live in this age of insincerity and deceit, I do not agree with your criticizing the Buddhist religion, as well as yourself, as you did just now. If you still see that you have some virtue and truth left within you, you should try to act in accordance with the plan of action that the Lord Buddha taught so rightly, but not in accordance with the plan of action in which the kilesas lead you and drag you along in their way in everything you do, all the time and every day, even while you believe that you are actually striving in the way of Dhamma. The path, fruition, and nibbana is a universal treasure, and the Lord Buddha taught that it may be acquired by anybody, a treasure that will be for your satisfaction one day for sure, as long as you do not keep thinking how difficult it is and how slow your attainment comes, which is nothing but an obstruction in your way. When we practice and strive in the manner of someone who feels that his body will break up if he keeps doing it, because he is so weak, lazy, and irresolute, it seems to me that we are like lazy, inconsequential fools who think they are going to bore a hole through a mountain using a small auger, and they are very anxious to do this within the time of a single day. It is so ludicrous that those who are truly wise with sharp wisdom and who really do strive just laugh at it. We should think and look at the manner of striving of those who were sons of the Sakya, the Savakas of the Buddha at the time of the Buddha, and see how they acted, and then compare it with our own striving, which is like someone who goes to the shore and just smacks the sea with his hand, which is enough to make us feel sorry and disheartened that his longing for nibbana is only to the extent of getting his hands wet. Look, think, and see how the kilesas are like an ocean, and the efforts we make are like the water on our hands. How far apart are they? People in this age of just wetting their hands in the ocean make little in the way of effort, yet their intention is to get free from the realm of samsara. Then when this does not happen as they expect it to, they find some excuse to blame the religion, the sasana, the time, the place, and the people of this or that period of time. They are not in the least ashamed of the way in which they display their own incompetence and stupidity, so that those acharyas who are truly wise and skilled feel disheartened and laugh wryly, saying that there is no way in which they can do anything about such people. To invest only a small amount of capital in a manner that is useless, and then to expect the most enormous returns on one's investment, is the way of an incompetent fool who builds his own charnel ground for cremating himself, and remains submerged in the mass of his own dukkha. So the round of samsara never weakens its hold on him so that he could feel that he may get free one day. The question that you asked me was in effect praising the teaching of Buddhism, sasana, Dhamma, and praising the age, the place, and the people at the time of the Lord Buddha, while at the same time criticizing the teaching, the age, the place, and people nowadays, were the words of praise and blame of an incompetent fool who puts obstructions in his own path until he cannot find a way to crawl out to safety. It was the question of someone who is incompetent, the question of someone who puts thorns in his own path to obstruct himself, and not a question which was designed to clear the way and make it free of obstacles, so that he can go ahead with confidence due to being interested in freeing himself from the kilesas by the means of the Svakata Dhamma, well-taught Dhamma, which is the middle way that was given impartially to all those beings in the world who have enough interest to practice the way rightly ever since its origins. If you will only have the mindfulness and wisdom to shed all these things from yourself, you would be worthy of some admiration. This is like sickness and diseases which people get, both serious and mild. When people want to cure themselves and they take the right remedy, they are likely to feel calm and easy, and the cure is effective. But if they are not interested in looking after themselves and overcoming the disease, it will probably get worse and can become dangerous. Except for minor complaints such as the common cold or minor skin troubles, which cure themselves without special attention. The kilesa diseases, which are not in the class of self-healing minor ailments, must be treated with medicine, and the medicine is the Dhamma way of striving, following the pattern which the sons of the Sakya, the Buddha's Savakas, practiced. One may be fully confident that this remedy will quell and get rid of all the kilesas, whether strong or mild or however else they may be. If you were only to think in this kind of way, I should feel more at ease about you, and I could admire you for being someone who has clever ways of thinking, and one who can have some confidence in his own ability to be able to pass beyond the realm of samsara, as well as having faith in the ability of the Lord Buddha and his religious teaching, sasana Dhamma, and faith that he penetrated Dhamma with his intuitive ability, and spread it abroad as the sasana Dhamma in the proper manner, and that this was a Dhamma of salvation, Niyanika Dhamma, truly able to lead beings to freedom, not blaming and criticizing himself, saying that his kilesas are very thick, so that he can only learn Dhamma slowly, while at the same time having no interest in curing them. Not blaming the Lord Buddha, saying that he did not formulate and teach Dhamma in a way that was equally suitable for his own time and for all other ages as well, nor blaming the Dhamma, saying that it is incapable or not penetrating enough to cure the kilesas of beings in this modern age in the way it did at the time of the Lord Buddha. Venerable Ajaan Mun continued, saying, I am not denying the fact that the strength of people's kilesas are different from what they used to be, and I agree that people at the time of the Lord Buddha had them far less than people do nowadays. The mode of teaching was also very different from what it is nowadays, as also were those who taught the way, and they were seers in most cases, with great understanding and true seeing. For the great teacher was the leader of the Savakas in formulating and teaching Dhamma to his followers and others. The teaching was therefore never wrong and never deviated from the truth, for it came straight from the heart of the Lord and from the hearts of his followers, which were completely purified. From this purity of heart they drew out Dhamma and taught others in language that was fresh and direct, without there being anything hidden or mixed in with it that was wrong or distorted. Those who listened to this Dhamma were intent on the truth, and they had fully committed themselves to it. So the situation was entirely suitable on both sides, and the results came stage by stage, being self-evident to them, and fulfilling the expectations of these people who were looking for truth. Therefore, they had no problems and questions which could interfere with their development. So it was that in those days many people attained Maggaphala each time the great teacher or his Savaka followers gave Dhamma teaching, whereas nowadays hardly anybody can attain. It is as though saying that people are no longer people, and Dhamma is no longer Dhamma, so there are no results coming from it. But in fact, people are people, and Dhamma is Dhamma, as they always were, but people are not interested in Dhamma now, so the Dhamma that enters into them does not reach the heart. The result is that people remain just people, and Dhamma remains just Dhamma, which is not likely to be of much use in bringing about the final attainment. Even if a large number of people were taught and listened to an exposition of the whole Tipitaka, it would be just like pouring water over the back of a dog. It immediately shakes it all off until there is none left. In this way, the Dhamma has no meaning in the hearts of people, much as water is of no consequence on the back of a dog. Venerable Ajaan Mun then asked Venerable Ajaan Khao, when you asked that question just now, was your heart like a dog's back? Or what was it like that you blindly put blame just on the Dhamma alone, saying that it had not brought results to yourself for attaining the path, fruition, and Nibbana the easy way, like it did in the time of the Lord Buddha, without thinking about your own heart, which was shaking off the Dhamma from itself faster than a dog could shake water off its back? If you will only reflect back and think about your own faults and failings, I think that some Dhamma will find a place to seep into your heart and remain there, not merely flowing through it like water flowing down a channel without any reservoir or storage place, which is how you are at present. Whether the people at the time of the Lord Buddha had few or many kilesas was just a matter of their own virtue or evil, which does not affect us or make any difficulties for us nowadays. People nowadays have their own kilesas of various kinds which cause trouble for themselves, until there is hardly anywhere in the world where they can live normally. If people have not enough interest in curing themselves, so that the world has some freedom from this trouble and freedom from the fire with which they burn each other, merely blaming and praising others, in whatever age they lived is not likely to be of any use at all. This is also true if each one of them is not interested in directing his blame and praise towards himself, towards this one who is creating the fire to burn himself and others, causing all sorts of trouble now in the present. For turning one's praise and blame towards oneself is the way to break the fires of lust, raga, hate and delusion apart from each other whenever they are in consort together, at least to the extent of having a way to go towards some degree of calm and happiness, so that one is not roasted by these fires beyond one's endurance. This is the way it should be in the world of human beings who are far more clever than any other species in the world. Venerable Ajaan Khao said, Venerable Ajaan Mun used to scold and blame me very fiercely for asking such questions which had no practical solution, although I did not ask such questions very often. But when Venerable Ajaan took up these questions and analyzed them, it was as if they were like thorns and splinters obstructing the sasana, himself, and myself as well, for which there is no available cure. It made me feel and see where I was at fault, and I would feel uneasy about it for many days, even though in fact I had no doubt that people nowadays could practice Dhamma. But Venerable Ajaan would still scold me and shred me with his fierce way of talking, which I reckon was right and suitable for someone like myself, who was always talking and could not be quiet and contented. On the other hand, this was also good, in that I used to hear Dhamma from him of a kind which went straight to my heart. In fact, what I have already told you is no more than a fraction of the deep, spirited, and fiery Dhamma which he delivered, for it was deeper than the ocean and more fiery than the fire of hell. He would also bring up the questions which I had asked him in the past, to stir me up time after time. Sometimes he would do this right in the middle of a meeting, when all the others were gathered there to hear Dhamma, and he would reveal my evil ways, talking about my wrong views, Mitsadirte, and likening me to Devadatta destroying the sasana. He would tear me into pieces until there was nothing left that was good, and he would go on like this for a long time, not letting up easily, until some of the other bhikkhus began to wonder about it. Afterwards they would come and ask me whether it was truly as Venerable Ajaan said. I had to explain how the questions I asked were not a true indication of my attitude, but that it was just a method of getting him to talk Dhamma. For normally, if nobody asks him some outlandish question, he does not speak Dhamma to us. But I suppose I was rather stupid in the questions that I used, for I jumped in with both feet and gave him the hammer to hit me over the head with. Maybe I should have asked a more normal and less inflammatory question, so that I could listen to Dhamma that was more sweet and soothing. Generally speaking, it was in fact as Venerable Ajaan Khao said. For if Venerable Ajaan Mun was asked questions that were not in any way strange or outlandish, he would just answer in a normal way. Then, even though it was Dhamma, his way of speaking was smooth and normal, and it made no lasting impression on one's heart. But when he was asked a strange, outlandish question, he became quite animated, and the import of the Dhamma which he brought forth was truly satisfying, as we have already described in Venerable Ajaan Mun's biography. In truth, Venerable Ajaan Mun had no doubts about Venerable Ajaan Khao's views, although the way in which he scolded him made it appear as though he was doubtful. But in fact it was just his way of teaching Dhamma which was the way of a skilled acharya, for he would change his attitude and style of teaching in all sorts of ways to arouse and wake up the rest of us who were listening, so as to make us think about and ponder his teachings, which would act as a reminder to us for a long time, Otherwise we would remain supine, clinging to our own stupidity, with no interest in thinking about anything at all, like a frog sitting and looking at a lotus flower without any purpose. But as soon as Venerable Ajaan rapped us on the head with his knuckles, it was as though our ears and eyes became brighter. It is in the nature of those Todanga Kambarthana bhikkhus who followed Venerable Ajaan Mun that they liked being stirred up and rapped on the head frequently to hold their attention and make them think. But if he talked in a smooth and even manner, they would listen quiescently, with nothing to arouse and catch the heart to make it excited, concerned, and a bit frightened. Their hearts then tended to go to sleep inwardly when there was no method nor anything else which was capable of making their minds active and thoughtful. Then various kinds of kilesas which had been waiting to take over were likely to find an opportunity to get out and go about causing trouble and disturbing their attention, because the method of teaching was not equal to the ability of the kilesas. But when they got an unusual form of teaching from Venerable Ajaan Mun, because he had been asked a question that warranted such a way of teaching, their mindfulness and wisdom was stirred up and became brighter and sharper. Therefore, although in asking Venerable Ajaan Mun questions Ajaan Khao was partly right and partly wrong, they were Dhamma questions from which he could expect to gain a lot of value, in the same way as he had often done so in the past. Venerable Ajaan Khao said that the first year that he spent the rains period, the Vassa, with Venerable Ajaan Mun in the Chiang Mai district, an indescribable enthusiasm, piti, and joy arose. This was an appropriate reward for the several years in which he had tried to follow Venerable Ajaan, for even though he had heard his teaching at times in various places, he only stayed for brief periods, which were not truly satisfying. After staying for a short while, he would be driven away by Venerable Ajaan, who told him that they must stay in separate places. But when an opportunity came and his meritorious tendencies, vasana, were helpful, he was allowed to stay for a rains period with Venerable Ajaan. This made him very happy, and he increased his striving greatly until he was hardly taking any sleep at all, sometimes spending the whole night striving at his meditation practice. Then one day his citta became fully integrated and went down into a state of calm where it had a complete rest for some time before it withdrew and rose up out of it. He was filled with wonder at this brightness of the heart, which went beyond what he had ever reached before, and it made him completely absorbed in Dhamma until the light of dawn appeared. That night he did not sleep at all. In the morning, he got up at the usual time and went about his duties, helping to clean and arrange things at Venerable Ajaan's hut, and taking his bowl, robes, and other things to his place where he ate food in the sala. When Venerable Ajaan came from the place where he did his meditation practice, it seemed that he watched Ajaan Khao unusually closely. Ajaan Khao himself noticed this, and felt very self-conscious and afraid that he may have done something or other wrong. After a short while, Venerable Ajaan said to him, "How is your meditation practice going now? Last night your citta was much brighter than it has been in the past, ever since you have been staying with me. This is how you must do it. This is the right way for one who searches for Dhamma. Now do you know where Dhamma is? Last night, where was that brightness?" He answered, "The brightness was in my heart, sir." But he felt afraid and ashamed until he almost started shivering, for he had never before been praised and asked a question at the same time like this. Venerable Ajaan Mun then asked him, "Where had the Dhamma been before this that you could not see it? That which you have seen is Dhamma, and you must always know it in this way from now on. Dhamma is in the heart, and in the future you must guard the level of your citta and the level of your striving, so that they are kept well up, and you must not let them deteriorate. For this is the ground of the citta, the ground of the Dhamma, the ground of your faith in Dhamma, and the ground of the path, fruition, and nibbana. All of them are just there. You must be confident and resolute in your striving if you want to transcend dukkha. And in doing this, you have got to do it just there, for it is absolutely certain that there is nowhere else you can get free from it but just this one place. You must not indulge in wishful thinking, for you are no longer blind, and there is no need to do so. Last night I sent the flow of my chitta out to look at you, and I saw your chitta brightly illuminating everything round you, and every time I sent my chitta out to look, it was the same way throughout the night. Because I also took no sleep last night at all. Part of the time I spent in samadhi bhavana, part of the time receiving deva guests, and part in sending my chitta to see how you were getting on. And it went on like this until dawn, without having any realization of the time. As soon as I came out of bhavana, I had to ask you about it, because I have always wanted to know about my fellows in Dhamma. Was it peaceful? Was it blissful this time? Venerable Ajaan Khao said that he remained silent, not daring to answer Venerable Ajaan. For he had already looked right through me until he could see my lungs and liver and everything else. So what would be the use of telling him? From then on I was much more afraid of Venerable Ajaan, and I was much more careful where he was concerned. Even before this, I was quite sure that he could know the minds and hearts of people just as he wished. But that night I experienced it for myself, which made me that much more certain, and I became very afraid of him in a way that is hard to describe. From that day on he was able to fix the state of his heart firmly and develop it steadily, more and more and bit by bit, without any deterioration or backsliding at all. He said, Venerable Ajaan Mun used to goad me quite frequently. Any self-indulgence and I would be told off immediately, and he would get fierce and scold me much more quickly than before. In fact, his frequent exhortation and reminders were methods of helping me to look after my chitta and Dhamma, and to make me more afraid of deteriorating and backsliding. From that time on, I continued to spend every Vassa period with Venerable Ajaan. After the Vassa, I would then go out wandering to practice the way in various places, wherever I found it to be suitable for striving. Venerable Ajaan Mun would also go off, but in a different direction so as to be on his own, for he did not like going out with any of the bhikkhus attached to him. So the bhikkhus all went out in different directions, each as he felt inclined. But whenever some internal problem arose in their hearts, they would make for Venerable Ajaan to ask him about it, so that he would unravel it and clear the problem, which he did every time. In this way it seems that the striving by way of the heart of Venerable Ajaan Khao progressed steadily. His mindfulness and wisdom gradually and steadily spread and branched out until it was infused into the heart, and they became one and the same thing. Whatever his bodily posture or activity, he maintained his effort with mindfulness and wisdom present in his striving for Dhamma, and it seems that his heart was bold and courageous, having lost all fear of those things which arouse and maintain thoughts and emotional states, aramana, which used to be his enemies. He was also certain of the path leading to freedom from dukkha, and he had no doubts about it, even though he had, as yet, not actually attained freedom.